Hi everyone, this Hangout on Air is live and it's kind of a special one today that I'm doing in honor of Cyber Monday tomorrow and also the Christmas, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa shopping season here. And it's about 4K TVs. And I'm doing this hangout because there's a lot of misinformation out there about 4K TVs, and it's very easy to get ripped off unless you really know what you're looking for. There's a lot of similarity between the way that 4K TVs market themselves and the way that, say, mattress companies market themselves. When you have mattress companies, they have all different models and they'll rename models, discontinue models, add new model names. The reason being there's a shell game out there that's played, so it makes it virtually impossible or extremely difficult to compare features to features against other comparable mattresses unless you tear in and do the tiny detail work to establish what is a good value, what is comparable, and what is not. And the same thing happens in buying a television. A lot of people see 4K TV and they just think, "Oh, this is awesome. This is going to be great." But they don't know about some of the features. They don't know whether they're buying true 4K, whether they're buying simulated 4K that takes 1080p picture size and upscales that to a rendered 4K image. There's a lot of flim flam that goes on. So I want to talk about some of the features that you really want to watch for, and then we'll take a couple minutes. We'll look at a few ads on here and we'll zero in on them because not everything's bad out there just because the price is low, that's for sure. Just understand that you're getting a trade-off of features for the price. Okay, and then to top it all off, down in the description box, you'll see links of what I think are good 4K TVs across various budgets that you can pick up on Amazon if you so choose using our link, and I hope that you will. 4K TVs are supposed to be very popular this year, and I know I've really been kind of chomping at the bit to talk to Missy Jen to see if we should get one for the house here or not, but I just don't know if we watch enough TV to really make that purchase worthwhile. But for those of you who are out there that are subscribed to the channel, I know a lot of you will be buying 4K TVs. So let's talk about some of the features that you need to have. And then, as I say, we'll dig down on some of the models and see what we're talking about here. Now, there's several things electronically speaking that you want. Two things are definitely very critically important. Number one is that you seek out a 4K TV that can render 4K a 4K picture. Very importantly, you don't want something that talks about a rendered 4K or an upscaled 4K experience. You want true 4K. Okay, so make sure that you watch for that, not some simulated 4K that's electronically generated. Okay. Number two, and even more importantly, is you need a 4K TV that has a high dynamic range. Now, what do I mean by a high dynamic range? Any of you that are photographers out there or videographers and you do your own color grading as I do when you do your work, you'll note that not every camera takes perfectly true to life images. Sometimes the contrast is a little weak. Sometimes the contrast is not doesn't enhance the overall beauty of the picture. A high resolution, high definition HDR will make the blacks crushed and very black, and it'll therefore enhance your colors against that very black dark background. You need a high definition resolution. Okay, high dynamic range in your high definition. High dynamic range. Repeat that after me because that's a real mantra that separates the really good 4K TVs from the so-so and the not so good ones. That high dynamic range, when you see something that has it, it looks very vivid because all the colors really stand out against your base black in there. And if that base black is not black enough, then you're losing a lot of your dynamic range. You're not going to see as much detail in your picture, okay? So you want something that has high dynamic range, okay? Look for that. Very, very, very important. A lot of them won't say, as you'll see in the specifications, when we go down, when they tab HDR, high dynamic resolution, you'll see that they don't have it, okay? So be aware. It costs money to put that into a set. The other thing that you want to be aware of is what I call the pain in the butt factor of a TV. You'd like to ideally have a 4K television that has multiple HDMI ports on it. And of course, HDMI is the most effective and modern way that we take external devices, home theaters, DVR players, and things like that, and we hook it in, Dolby systems, we hook it into our television. So we get to play through with the 4K. It's a lot easier if you have a lot of things that you can just use multiple HDMI ports instead of stringing together some joy rig thing that you so that you can plug in all of your HDMI devices. So your HDMI ports are critical. Now let me see if I can go to a screen share here. This is always this is always iffy. And let's go ahead and go to our application window, and let's look at this RCA, which is not the worst thing in the world here. If we go to look at this, it's a 43-inch 4K ultra high definition LED TV, and it sells for $279. When you put some other things in, it comes over $300. It's comparable on the Amazon shipping. But if you look at this, we'll go down here and we'll scroll at some of the pertinent facts here. And here's what you want to look at. In the RCA product details, you have the high resolution, ultra high definition, which is good, to 3840 by 2160. But you have the refresh rate, and this is something else I want to talk about here too. The more often that your picture refreshes in a certain period of time, and this is another critical factor for buying, the more your picture is not going to be blurred or smearing when you see action on TV. If you've seen some TVs with a low refresh rate, like 60 hertz, and the 60 hertz isn't bad, I'm just saying it's kind of the standard. But you can often see a lot of smearing when a football player runs or somebody goes up for a pass, or you're watching racing on TV, or things that are really in motion, like real highly dynamic movies with chase things and chase scenes and high action scenes. You can often see a blurring or smearing of the picture. And that's because the picture's not generating, it's not giving you enough frames per whatever the time period being measured is. 60 is kind of the standard here for a refresh rate. But there are theoretically, you don't really see them out there, but they go all the way up to 240 hertz or 240 times cycling through and refreshing. So my best advice is, if you're not really budgeted, is try to look for the ones above 60, which would be the 120 refresh rates. And there'll be a lot of 60s out there that they're trying to stick you with higher price, those refresh rates. But you want to try to get the 120 at least refresh rates. That way you're getting more pictures taken over a shorter period of time. And remember, that's all that video is. It's capturing photos in super fast ways, like 120 frames per second, just like in videography we do. The more frames that we capture, 240 frames per second, the more frames that we capture in a short period of time, the more the action can slow down or be enhanced when you're watching it without having any distortion of the picture. So make sure that you look for this thing called the refresh rate. 60's okay, like I say, for $279 for this TV. You know, it's 4K TV. Okay, I mean, you could probably do worse for your money if you're on a budget, but just recognize you're not going to have the totality, the full motion high definition. Okay. You also come down here, the aspect ratio, which is good, 16:9. We're no longer 4:3 aspect ratio. And you see the connections down here, HDMI ×4. So that's a good thing on here. You want to have those multiple HDMI inputs on the unit. It just makes it a lot easier. So let's stop sharing that. Let's see if we can go back to where I am here. Yeah, and let's see if we can share another one now. Let's go to this window here, and let's look at the Sony 55-inch here. Let's share that for a minute. Let's take a look at that. This is pretty standard price against everything. This is a Sony 55-inch, and a lot of people will be on the 55-inch is a very desirable platform size, and these TVs used to be $2,000 to $3,000, and now this one's down to, you can get this for $1,000 now. And let's look at this one. It's called the 2160p Smart 4K Ultra High Definition TV with high dynamic range, and that's a very important thing. If a manufacturer is going to give you a high dynamic range, they're going to crow about it in the title there, because it costs money to do that. So remember, that's going to give you your most contrasted and beautiful picture on here. But let's go down and let's look at some of the aspects of it that we have down here. And here's where we get to the meat of things. Extended dynamic range, 5 times the contrast range of a conventional LED TV. So very, very precisely balancing that picture for excellent contrast. Or boosting and dimming technology, not so much important. The 4K, the high dynamic range, video content, exceptional detail, color and contrast with a far wider range of brightness, which means if you're looking at one of these TVs with a high dynamic range, you're going to see much more detail in the shadow areas, because, well, a high dynamic range is picking up more of the true image, capturing more of that image as it's coming in. So it's got the measurements, HD, full HD, high dynamic range. They repeat a lot of things to sort of build it out. Now this has 4 HDMI inputs, so it's easy for home theater connections and things like that. They talk about a motion flow down here, and this is where manufacturers like to tweak that, what I was talking about, that refresh rate, or how often that picture is being refreshed on the TV. So they engage in a little mumbo jumbo. You know, they work with the marketing department. We need a way to not just flat out say it's a 120 hertz refresh rate. Let's call it something like a motion flow. You know, that we even smooth that 120 out even more to allow fast moving action sequences. Well, you know, it's either 120 hertz or it's not. We can't call it when it's not. It's got multiple USB inputs on that too. So that pretty much gives you an idea there, what I'm talking about in terms of. Let's see if we can take this thing off now and stop that sharing here. There we go. Stop sharing there, and then we'll bring that back to me here. That pretty much tells you in a very simple way what you need to really know when you're looking at a 4K TV. Critically, make sure you don't get, if you can afford it, if you can pay a little more, get a 120 hertz refresh rate, okay? Don't be bamboozled by 60 with Dynaflow technology or something like that. Go for the 120. If you can't afford it, the 60 is fine at the price point. Get a high dynamic range if you can. Let's go back to this. Let's go back to this RCA for a second here, and let's take another look at that and the dynamic range here, just to look at that and what it says when it gets down to the specs. And oftentimes they'll put that on there. See, it doesn't say anything about the. We'll have to maybe go to the quick specs here. Yeah, we come down here and it says high dynamic range HDR, no. So now you guys realize when you buy this, you're not really getting the high dynamic range. So they don't put it in the cover details that you see, but you have to go into the quick specs to see that. So just be aware of that when you're in the market for these TVs, that there's a certain bamboozling factor that goes on. High dynamic range, 120 hertz refresh rate, okay? And if possible, get multiple HDMI ports so that you can easily hook in your items. You're getting a lot of value these days. Just make sure your money stretches as far as possible when you're looking at 4K TV. Just a short little, short little video to share with you today. Your thumbs up are appreciated, and I hope this helps you. And if you're looking for some ideas for 4K, I've have 3 or 4 listed down in the description box that really do fit the budget for the low end. And yes, the RCA is in there. It's a good price. I mean, for that for having 4K, and you're not going to have the dynamic range, but you know, it's $300, and then you're going to go up to you know, $800, $1,000. You're going to get a good experience. Stay away from the 55-inch. You know, Chinese made ones that are going to have a 60 hertz refresh rate. They're not going to have good dynamic range. You're going to pay $300 or $400. You're going to walk into your neighbor's house and say, you know, what the hell? Yeah, I have 4K TV, and it sure doesn't look like that. Happy Christmas and holiday shopping for you, and I hope you enjoyed the hangout. Give it a thumbs up, and your comments are appreciated. Thanks, everybody.